As you've seen, we've changed the order a bit. I was going to be first, but I think it actually goes better that I'm last. First of all, I can skip some things that have already been said. So just give me a moment here. No. I think while I'm doing this, I recommend all of you take a look at this. Ted won the second John Severinghaus Translational Science Award at the ASA. Sort of in his own words, talks about his career. It's called After You, Please, and it's a beautifully written article where he really gives much and maybe even too much credit to everyone else other than himself, and the ideas that he had and how he pursued those. He sort of makes it sound like he was lucky, and we all know that that's not true. We all have a little bit of luck, but it's a beautifully written piece. I recommend that you all do that. We can also send it out maybe as a link, Morgan, for everybody. All right, so as you heard earlier, Yosemite and hiking were only later in life, I suppose, one of Ted's passions, but one of those was in Yosemite. And so again, I thank Morgan for putting these slides together, but some beautiful shots of Yosemite in the background. So I want to talk a little bit about how he came to UCSF. I know you've heard a lot of this, so I'll be able to skip over a few things. You already heard the quote, which really surprised me, that essentially as a first-year medical student, you could get part-time work in the summer as an anesthesiologist, which does seem frightening, and perhaps contributed to the idea that our specialty didn't maybe always get the respect that it deserved, because I guess if it could be done well by a first-year medical student, perhaps you didn't need to proceed any further. But there's some great pictures of this that Morgan has put together. I also want to acknowledge Dick Schlobaum, who's here in the front row, who throughout his career at UCSF was an avid photographer. We have a huge archive of his photographs, thousands, which I very much appreciate. And we may even ask for a little bit of help. We've found some people that we weren't able to identify that we are able to now. This department is very much Midwestern born and bred, from Stuart Cullen, followed by Hamilton, Severinghaus, and Eager. So a very strong Iowa component. We don't have a lot of Iowa people left, but it's where we're established. I'd like to think that we have Midwestern sensibilities, even though we're in San Francisco. So here are some, as I said, and also Ernie Guy, who went on to be the chief out at San Francisco General. This was not a very diverse group. One of the things I'm very proud of in our department today is that we are a very diverse group with more, in the last 2 years, more women than men being hired as faculty and recruited as residents. But these were the people that really started it. You should know that when Stuart Cullen was recruited to be chair of the department, he said, he would, I think it was a little hesitant to come, but would only come if anesthesia, which at the time was a division of the Department of Surgery, which was the most common way it was done across the country, said, I will only come if anesthesia becomes an independent department. And that was really important. There were very few, we weren't the first certainly, but there weren't a lot of independent departments of anesthesia in the country at that time. And I think that was probably one of the very first important starts for us becoming a powerhouse in this institution. We have a lot of leadership of this institution, always have, and I think that harkens all the way back to Stuart Cullen. I think you've heard a little bit about this, sort of the path that Cullen recruiting Hamilton and Severinghaus, and then Ted following Severinghaus to come work with him. I mean, I had the great fortune to work with both Severinghaus and Eager, both as my attending anesthesiologist when I just starting. They both stopped doing clinical work around the time that I was a resident. One of the things that I thought was delightful, though, was when I was a new faculty member and you're trying just to keep up with the residents, to keep up with doing cases, Ted would often page me, and he would ask if it was okay if he could come to the operating room and teach my residents for me. And I thought, well, okay. And it was delightful. And I would try to also sneak in as well, though I had been a recent resident and lived through his legendary lectures. Would love to listen to those things again, because at every stage of your career, when you hear those lectures again, and we were just looking at them again yesterday, you get more and more appreciation for them as you become a more experienced practitioner. We've already heard about the history of Mac, and Steve did a nice job reading some of these quotes, so I'll just move through some of these great pictures that we have. You already saw this picture. I didn't totally understand what was with Ted's outfit here, but We'll just leave it at that. But here's actually a great picture. You did hear that part of his becoming enamored with hiking was after he actually heard a lecture here from Tom Hornbein from Seattle, as you know, had done a lot of work with Everest and high altitude. In fact, that's Tom Hornbein there on the table, and you can see Severinghaus and Ted. And we do have some great pictures of. There was a lot of. You've already heard there were no IRBs. Which was bad, but often the experimental subjects were the investigators. We have some great pictures, for example, up on, we have a high altitude station on White Mountain in the Sierra. We're going to have a large group going there this summer where we still do studies, and pretty amazing pictures of giving each other lumbar punctures and putting in pulmonary artery catheters, stuff that I don't find the same dedication to research now. that there was then. You had to really believe in what you were doing to do this to each other. So I maybe, although we didn't have IRBs, Larry, at least perhaps some of these things had withstood the test of testing on each other. Ted was a remarkable teacher, and you saw the pictures that of our residents sent him. That series of lecture is a huge loss for us. We do have them. We have the PowerPoints, we have some video. We're going to really try to put that together as a high-quality product, because that will never again be replicated. Just an extraordinary learning experience, and everybody would get the uptake and distribution book. And I think it's one of the things that makes our resident graduates better than the graduates from other programs. Sorry, but but they are. It was just an extraordinary experience, and at the same time, when I started out on the faculty as a pretty dedicated researcher, the weekly research conference that we had was remarkable. Ted brought a great rigor to those conferences. We were all terrified to present, and that was a good thing because we spent a lot of time on our presentations. He really would try to lock the door at 5 o'clock when the conference started. And even if you were late and you could smell the pizza wafting through the door, you were really upset about that. But those taught us all a lot about the rigor of science and presenting science that I think we don't necessarily have. You've heard about the first dog studies on MAC and then the human studies as well. After Ted passed away, Lynn came over, and also Steve and Larry, and we went through his office, which he had lived in for a long time, and it was an incredible shrine, and in some ways it would have been great to keep it that way, and unfortunately we were so pressed for space we couldn't do that. We found some great stuff. I mean, we found some of his original notebooks, as you can see here, where hundreds of compounds were written down that had been tested. Then also found like a couple small wooden boxes filled with glass syringes with liquids in them. I really didn't quite know what to do with those, whether they had some sort of hazardous waste disposal, but at the same time I felt that perhaps the anesthetic is, I didn't know what to do with them. I don't know, they may still be around. I said, just hold on to them. Yeah, I don't know, there's not enough to test them on each other, but it's not too late, Larry, if you're interested. But it was really remarkable to see all these things and his notes. Much of this has been given to the library here at UCSF. We do have the Goodell collection, and I saw Merlin Larson is here, who is one of our resident historians, and he's worked a lot and is working on a project looking at the history of anesthesia in California, which is, mostly UCSF, I would say, but we're trying to get all sort of the West Coast and California anesthesia history and working with the library here so that those things can become available both physically, we have some exhibits, but especially online so that you can all look at those. There's a lot of great stuff going all the way back actually to Chauncey Leake, who was here, who went to the Amazon and brought back curare. And there's some great, actually some video films of that. And again, I felt a little inadequate seeing him down there in his safari outfit out in the jungle, and they're picking plants, and it's pretty remarkable stuff. So I think what I'll finish with, you've heard a lot about the science and his scientific collaborators. Again, in some ways, the loss will be felt deepest by our residents. He was unique. He was deeply loved by our residents. And one of the things that is, I have to go to a lot of conferences and meetings every year. Certainly my favorite is the WARC, the Western Anesthesia Residents Conference. This is a conference that's an annual conference that rotates through, I think, the 17 or 18 Western programs. Every year it's in a different location, so each program hosts the conference. And it's a chance for the residents of each institution to shine. They're expected to organize it. They get some funding from their chair. They put together the program. They run the meeting. They run the clock on each talk, make sure everything runs smoothly. And it was very close to Ted's heart as well. And he picked up that idea actually from Bill Hamilton, who had started the MARC, which is the Midwestern Anesthesia Residents Conference. And so we have a few pictures from that. He will be deeply missed. This year's conference will be hosted by UC San Diego, and I'm going to work with them and others, and we're going to put together a sort of tribute to Ted at that. So if anybody's around for that, we also maybe Morgan can send out a link to that as well. We're just starting to work on that, but though it just will be a lecture and just sort of a tribute to Ted and all he had done, because he supported this meeting not only with organization and enthusiasm, but supported it financially as well. This is the work in 2014, which is was in Los Angeles, and you can see Ted front and center, and the great love that all of our residents had for him. And this is the picture that you already saw, where after the lectures, our residents put together a mug with Ted's picture on it, which he really treasured. You can see him there. The last work that he attended was last year in Portland. And it was just great to have him there. He's going to be very much missed. So I want to thank all the speakers for coming today. We're going to, I think they'll be coming in a few minutes to start setting up lunch. Yes, Morgan? They haven't started yet. At some small risk that they'll start coming in and making some noise, I thought it might be nice if we have a few minutes, if there's anybody that wants to come say a couple words about Ted. I think we could do that now. Again, with some risk that the lunch setup will come. And so I would open the microphone to anybody who wants to say something, and thank all of you for coming. It's a great turnout. It's a great honor for me to chair this department with a history of people like Ted. So thank you.